always thought of China as a global superpower, an economic might, a threat to America's dominance. What I was about to find out would change everything.
China's population is currently 1.4 billion people, but that's projected to shrink by nearly half by the end of the century.
The number of migrants arriving at the southern border is unprecedented. So what's the fastest growing group among them? Chinese migrants. Yes, you heard that right, Chinese.
The more I began to study China, the more I saw a country completely different to the one normally portrayed. The question though, is this really the next superpower, like they claim? Or more like a nation right on the verge of total collapse?
We are looking at the end of China as a political entity within a decade or two and an economic entity within a decade.
Now we have a situation in the case of China where the economy is likely to be 2, perhaps 3 times larger than that of the US. So imagine you're the biggest kid on the block for as long as anyone can remember, and suddenly a kid comes along who's twice your size. And the foundation of war is economics.
China is clearly past its peak. The growth rate is going to come down pretty rapidly.
He's just terrifying to people because he murders dissidents, he murders anybody that...
巩固和增强经济回升向好态势，实现。
President Xi has called for the mass production of humanoids by 2025. He has laid out a long-term goal of surpassing the West in technology.
With China on a mission to reclaim what it sees as its rightful position, center of the world.
It's not a good idea to bet against the Chinese people.
Because they are going away, and they're going away this decade for certain.
To answer this question, we need to go to the country of Japan. Japan? Yes. Japan was once similar to the way China is today. In 1980, they were the second largest economy in the world. They were at the forefront of technology innovation. Tokyo was a major financial center, real estate was booming, and everyone felt rich. What the people of Japan didn't know was they were about to experience a crippling era of deflation and a brutal economic collapse. A long collapse. A period we now infamously know as Japan's lost decade.
Oh, the Japanese collapse was one of the worst economic periods the world has ever seen. Even today, Japan has never fully recovered.
China currently have all of the characteristics that Japan had, and then you see they've just touched into deflation. Their real estate market is standing on one leg. Their population, thanks to the one-child policy, are not exactly spring chickens anymore. You start to see why Ray Dalio has warned, China, if you don't play your cards right, the lost decade is next yours to experience.
China is in a very difficult situation, and the geopolitical issues are important, and the capital issues are important.
Dalio said on LinkedIn that President Xi believes that there is a 100-year storm on the horizon. That assessment seems right to me.
But hang on, then why are we getting other economists saying don't be worried about China crashing, be worried about something completely different?
Economists are predicting that by 2033, China will be the largest superpower in the world.
China's economy is very strong. And they're world champion in actually making products better, faster, and cheaper.
You say, like, how many smart, hardworking people are there in China? There's far more there than there are here.
We can have a bet. $2 million in 20 years, China will overtake US.
You see, the Chinese are by no means stupid. In 2013, the CCP started building their plan to dominate global trade. This includes a railroad connecting China all the way to London, gas pipelines from the Caspian Sea to Xinjiang, high-speed train networks in Southeast Asia, seaports dotted throughout the maritime Silk Road in different countries, but owned and built by China. If you study history, then you would know about China and the ancient Silk Road, the way they used it to export silk and grow into a dynasty. Well, what if China wanted to restore this ancient road to its former glory? I'm no Alex Jones and this is no conspiracy theory. That's exactly what China are working towards. And when you see what they are capable of developing, you see this is not a pipe dream at all.
The Chinese government has been making big investments into robotics. This has helped them become the largest industrial robot producer in the world. It includes this humanoid robot, which the Chinese want to help care for their aging population. This robot, which can make coffee and interact with people, and a robo-dog which
can bark, give a paw, amusingly stomp and spin in place, and even play music.
China's engineering and manufacturing capabilities blows my mind every time I read about it. Take, for example, this town in Tianducheng. If you didn't know better, you would think this is Paris. It's got the Eiffel Tower, French-styled ornaments, French-style buildings, except it's not Paris. It's 14,000 k's away from France, built on the east coast of China. They just like the design of the French capital, so as you do, you just put it in your home country.
There's something about being in a place that's your home that somebody copied and pasted.
Or if you look at Tianjin, China, you might think that you're in downtown Manhattan. It's got the Twin Towers, it's got the Rockefeller Center, it's even got the Hudson River. Except this is not the USA. Once again, you're in China. If the Chinese want to build something, they can do it. But there's one thing rather unique about these two cities. You start to read about them and you find out that they're ghost cities, built to accommodate millions of people, but apparently the people just never came. Brilliant manufacturing, brilliant design, brilliant architecture, except they're missing the most important ingredient that a city needs. And it's not just these two ghost cities. Dotted throughout the landscape, studies have identified 50 of these in China with 50 million vacant units.
All of them were bizarre. There's no other way to describe just a city meant for thousands of people that's just completely empty.
I mean, it's something that's kind of like a nightmare, like a dystopian movie of the future, and you just wake up and all the people are gone, and it's just you and these like empty, husk of, buildings everywhere.
And as Yes Theory found out, the media slightly exaggerated how ghostly some of these cities really were. They do have people in them, but certainly nowhere near the amount a typical city would have. So how did China get things so drastically wrong, dedicating billions in resources to build entire cities that are, yes, impressive, yet in a way useless? Well, to answer that, you need to understand how China's system is designed. This country is run very differently to the United States. In China, it is not the power of the people that matter, it's not the power of the free market to wholly determine where money flows. The power lies in the hands of one party, the CCP, and in particular, one man, Xi Jinping. And recently, something happened with him that we've never seen before.
China's Communist Party has appointed President Xi Jinping to an unprecedented third term as leader.
The fact that it's his third is historic.
Evidence that he has now amassed more power than any Chinese leader since Mao Zedong. In the closing chapters of the party congress, 2 aides apparently removed Xi's predecessor from the front row of dignitaries. Was he unwell, or was it a political purge?
If anyone had hopes on a balance of power, it seems like Xi had a different plan. Any billionaires that thought they had some sort of control would soon think again. In October 2020, one of China's richest men, Jack Ma, criticized those in power. He said that they had a pawn shop mentality with regards to their governance. 1 month later, Ma mysteriously disappeared from public view, and with his company Ant Financial, something odd happened.
Welcome back. I want to share some very big news that has been developing this morning.
China's fintech giant Ant Group was on pace to break IPO records. In a dramatic turnaround, Chinese regulators brought the IPO plans to a halt.
Jack Ma's Ant Group IPO has been completely cancelled.
And then Ma would go missing from China for some years, later to return, yet not as a businessman, but a teacher. Communism was killing the golden goose, and the rich and wealthy were firmly put in their place. But it wasn't just the people at the top who got put in line. Any regular Joe who did something that the Communist Party disagreed with got put in their place.
If a traffic camera catches you jaywalking in China, it will convict you of jaywalking and take money out of your bank account with no intermediating judiciary at all, and show a picture of you to the people in the neighborhood so they know that you have jaywalked, and reduce your social credit score. And if your social credit score falls below a certain level, you can't buy drinks from a vending machine. You can't play video games. You can't go on a train. You can't get out of your 15-minute city. All that's already in place in China.
Do you think that that would be helpful or unhelpful?
I think it'll bring in a totalitarian tyranny so 100% complete that it would make George Orwell's 1984 look like a picnic.
When you see everything happening, it doesn't surprise me why so many Chinese are fleeing to America. I would too. But if you thought that this was the worst problem that China is facing, well, what if I told you that it wasn't? Thanks to the insane policies that communism brought, the most important part to China may be on the verge of something never seen before.
China's leaders are trying to find ways to battle what many economists have described as a demographic ticking time bomb.
China is expected to see a population crash of biblical proportions, like nothing the human race has ever witnessed before.
The population problem is going to be facing huge challenge. 1.4 billion people in China sounds a lot, but I think next 20 years we'll see this thing will bring big trouble to China. The speed of population decreasing is going to speed up. And you call it collapse.
Accelerating collapse.
Accelerating
collapse.
To understand what's happening, we need to rewind 40 years. In 1980, China was worried. They were worried that population growth was getting out of hand, and the CCP's concern was that with too many people, they would consume all of China's resources.
Mao was concerned that as the country was modernizing, the birth rate wasn't dropping fast enough, and that the young generation was literally going to eat the country alive.
But this problem could easily be solved. China has no democracy, they have communism. With communism, the CCP has absolute power. And with absolute power, the population problem was going to be easily sorted. In the 80s, the CCP introduced a new policy, the one-child policy, where couples could have a maximum of one child. And this policy was ensured in a rather brutal manner.
40 years ago, birth control operations such as sterilization, abortions, and IUD insertions began to dramatically increase. Around 1983, China sterilized nearly 20 million and induced nearly 15 million abortions.
Cruel, but it worked. The population growth rate began to fall. The only problem is that it worked almost too well. 40 years down the line, and China has a replacement rate of 1.15 births per woman. Science says to maintain a population, that number should be 2.1. Because of this, China has now been hit with what's known as the infamous death cross. This is where you switch from having more births than deaths to more deaths than births. And what's concerning is that since the death cross, things have only gotten worse. We've seen even less people having babies and more people dying. Sad, but it might be that China end up learning the hard way that if you enforce extreme policies, you end up getting extreme results.
With only one child being allowed, sadly, the Chinese prioritize one gender over the other. Parents would often do what they could to ensure that their child was male. This gender is considered to be the primary breadwinners. They're considered to take care of their parents when they're older. The female generally marries into a different family.
This has obviously left Chinese demographics horribly skewed. You have many men with few females.
Because of one-child policy, a lot of girls got aborted in China, so they kept boys. Now,
so there's many men that have no chance of ever finding a woman because there are no women.
Yeah, over 30 million men in the rural areas cannot find wives.
On top of this, you have healthcare technology improving, so old people are getting older, but you have few young people to look after those old people. This means not only do you have a population that is collapsing, it's collapsing in such a manner with few youth, many elderly, and little amounts of women. The ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, may be hitting China a little too close to home. So this leaves President Xi with a dilemma. How do we fix everything? Well, the answer might be something very simple. Revert back to the system that dug your people out of poverty and into a superpower, and just maybe avoid the system that killed 80 million in the days of President Mao.
If they don't address these issues pronto, their major attraction may turn from the Great Wall of China to something more like the Great Fall of China.